Welcome back to the channel, and this week's vlog features three things.
Crazy action, crazy results, and the worst bad beat of my life, all featured at Capital Casino.
We buy in for our usual $500 at the 1-3 match stack game, and in our first playable hand, the $6 straddle is on, which we love to see. Player in the cutoff open limps, and when I look down at King Queen of Spades on the button, I raise it up to $25. Small blind decides to put in the call, and when it gets folded back to the limper, he puts in the call as well. With $80 in the middle, we're going three ways to a Queen 10-3 rainbow board, flopping top pair with the second best kicker. Both players decide to check to me, and I personally think that I have this board pretty locked up, so I decide to just throw in a 1/3 size bet of $25. Both of them decide that it's a fair price to see a turn and put in the chips. So with $155 in the middle, the turn comes out to 6 of diamonds, which really shouldn't change anything. The small blind checks in flow, but now the cutoff decides to lead out for just $35. This is such a rare line to see in live poker, but this sizing just screams weakness, so I'm not going to allow that, but I also don't want to lose him if I do have him dominated, so I just raise his bet to $85, trying to get some value while I still think I'm ahead. Small blind gets out of the way, and the cutoff quickly puts in the call. The hands I'm putting him on is a weaker Queen X holding like Queen Jack, or even a 10X holding like Jack 10, trying to see a cheap turn. So once he puts in the call, the pot has grown to $325, and he only has about $160 left. So if we see a safe card, I'm going to send all the chips in the middle and splash the pot like I'm Teddy KGB.
That's it. Well,
but that's not what happens when the river brings out the Jack of clubs, bringing in a lot of two-pair holdings. When our opponent checks to us, I'm happy to get to showdown, so I check it back. He flashes me 10-9 for flop middle pair, and I turn over our top pair, and it's good. I highly doubt he was calling a river bet for any sizing, so I'm just happy to scoop in a pot right away. After winning a small bomb pot with flop trips, we go to our next hand where the hijack limps and I raise pocket 10s to $15 from the cutoff. Both the button and limper put in the call, so with $45 in the middle, the flop comes out 10 deuce deuce with 2 hearts, giving us top boat. The hijack checks in flow, and I can see a world where I bet small here to bloat the pot, but I decide to just check it back to hopefully let them catch up. The button checks it behind, so we're still going three ways to a turn, and it comes out the King of Hearts, bringing in the front door flush. Hoping someone has a king, I decide to throw out just a $20 bet after the hijack checked, and now the button raises me to $65. The hijack gets out of the way, and now I have a decision. The button is basically saying that he has a flush, and I can definitely make a case for just calling and check raising the river, but one, I didn't want a fourth heart to come on the river, killing my action. And two, I don't want to give our opponent the chance to check back the river. So for those two reasons, I decide to re-raise to $185. He doesn't think too long before quickly putting in the call, so now I know that for a fact he has a flush. The pot has now ballooned to $415, and we're praying for a non-heart river, and that's what we get when it comes out the ace of clubs. Our opponent has a little over a pot-sized bet left, but I want to ensure that I can get called, so I gather my thoughts and decide to throw out a river bet of $295. Our opponent now goes deep in the tank. He's taking his time trying to figure out what I can have and starts talking out loud. He says how I shouldn't have aces or kings because I should be betting that on the flop, which I totally agree with. Then he says how the only hand that makes sense is pocket 10s, and that's when my heart dropped a little because now I'm thinking how he's going to hero fold a flush and I'm not going to get paid. So he keeps talking out loud and trying to process what I could have, but he eventually convinces himself that I could have a flush as well, which I would have played the same way, and sticks in the call. I turn over my hand and he reveals to me that he had ace-4 of hearts for the nut flush for a complete cooler. I just got to tip my cap and give him credit for even thinking this long. If I'm not getting snap called by the nut flush on the river there, then it just means one thing. I got to get my street cred up and mix in some more bluffs because I feel like Chris Rock in The Longest Yard.
The more prone to violence that the inmate is, the more stars he gets.
Let's see how many stars my maniacal ass got.
Wow.
Well, half a star. That's got to be a mistake. Check it again. Check it again.
In our next hand, we look down at pocket tens once again, and after someone limps, we raise it up to some amount, and our opponent to our left jams all in for about $100. When it gets folded back to me, I obviously put in the chips. We both turn over our hands, which I'm a big fan of, and we have ourselves a flip against ace-jack offsuit. I haven't fared too well in these flips throughout the vlog's history, so I'm looking to change that. The flop comes out queen 9-4 rainbow, turn is the 8 of clubs, the river is the 2 of spades, and we finally win ourselves a flip. Shout out to pocket tens for being the absolute GOAT today. 2 o'clock is quickly approaching, which is when I always leave, and we're up over $700 at this point of the day. I look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings under the gun, and open them up to $20. Next act puts in the call, and the button also puts in the call. I haven't played with either of these guys before, but they both bought in super deep, and usually that means that it's players that are seeking action and capable of bluffing. So with that being said, we're going 3 ways to a flop out of position, and the dealer throws out an 8-7-3 2-diamond board. I start off with a 2/3 size bet of $45, and just next to act calls. At this point, he could have all sorts of hands, but since he didn't raise me, I think he's capped to all the diamond draws, 6-7 suited, 10-9 suited, and pocket nines through pocket jacks. We're going heads up to a turn with $150 in the middle, and it comes out the 10 of spades, putting 2 flush draws on the board. I think this is a much better card for our opponent. When that's the case, especially up against a thinking player, I usually just check for pot control when I'm out of position. So that's what I do, and he puts in a pretty big bet of $125. Not gonna lie, I'm not really loving this spot for how big he bet, but with 2 flush draws on the board, I'm just never folding an overpair here. I stick in the call, and the pot has ballooned to exactly $400. There's not many cards left in the deck that I want to see, especially when the river comes out the ace of hearts, giving all the nut flush draws top pair. I disappointedly check and flow, and luckily our opponent checks it back. I turn over my hand, and it's good against the one hand that we can beat, which is king 10 of diamonds. He flopped a flush draw and turned top pair, so he was never going anywhere. Even though we played it the passive way, I'm just happy to take down a solid pot against an aggressive player out of position.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, 2 o'clock struck, and this is one of the days that I wish I could have stayed till midnight because things were just going so smooth. We're into the game for the original 500, which is rare nowadays, and out for $1,440 for a nice $940 profit. Pretty good start to the month, and let's see what day 2 has in store. For a little day 2 context, all of our interesting hands came against one guy who is an unorthodox action player. He's hard for me to read, so keep that in mind going forward. We lost a couple small pots with the worst hand in poker, pocket wax, and after being down $100, I added on $500 more because I wanted to cover certain players in this match the stack format. We're already into the game for an even $1,000 in just 20 minutes. In our first interesting hand, Under the Gun opens to just $6. Under the Gun 1 calls, the small blind, who is the aforementioned player, calls, and for $3 more, I'm just never going anywhere, so I stick in the call with 9-7 of spades. 4 people are going to this flop, and we get the best board we could possibly ask for without actually hitting anything when it comes out Queen 8-6 with 2 spades, giving ourselves a straight flush draw. After the small blind checks, I lead out for $20, looking to either take it down now or bloat this pot up with all my equity. The Under the Gun 1 player sticks in the call, and so does the small blind. So with $80 in the middle, the turn comes out the 5 of diamonds, giving us the nuts and putting 2 flush draws on the board. The small blind, who is the unorthodox player, now takes matters into his own hands and leads out for $30. I've seen this player make this move with super strong hands, but I've also seen him do it with draws trying to set his price. So with the nuts, I obviously put in the raise and make it $100. When it gets folded back to him, he quickly puts in the call. With $280 in the pot, the river comes out the 6 of diamonds, bringing in the backdoor flush. Out of nowhere, he now donks again for $50 this time, and this seems like such an underbluff spot. But he used such a small sizing, I just don't see how I could flat here and look myself in the mirror the next morning. So I raised the price of poker to $125, looking to get some value and not scare away his 2-pair holdings. But the unsuspected happens when he re-raises to $255, and now I'm just in complete shock. He's only representing the backdoor flush, but I'm having trouble putting him on that based on his small turn donk bet and small river donk bet. I go in the tank for the longest I've ever gone in and try to see how he got here with the backdoor flush. What makes the most sense is 8x or 6x of diamonds, so I eventually convince myself that I'm beat and toss my hand in the muck. Our opponent flashes us ace-jack of diamonds for the nuts. Definitely wasn't expecting that combo of diamonds, but more power to him. Even though I made the right laydown, I'm still pretty pissed off that I had the ultimate nuts on the turn and a redraw with spades, but we somehow lose it all to a backdoor flush of all things. In this next hand, I throw on the $6 straddle, and under the gun opens to just $15. Under the gun won in the big blind call, and when I look down at ace-jack offsuit in the straddle, I throw in the squeeze to $80. The original under the gun opener folds, but to my surprise, the under the gun 1 player and big blind both put in the call. With $250 already in the middle, the flop comes out ace-queen-jack rainbow, giving ourselves top and bottom pair. The big blind now does his special move and donks for $45, and now I don't know what to do. As we saw from the last hand, he's very capable of leading with super strong hands and super weak hands. I can take ace-king out of the equation because he would have 3-bet that pre-flop, so I'm either putting him on ace-queen, king-10, queen-jack, or a hand like ace-10. So given that, I decide to just stick in the call and see what happens in position. The under the gun 1 player gets out of the way, so we're going heads up to a turn, which comes out the 8 of diamonds, putting 2 diamonds on the board. He continues the aggression and bets for $60 this time. Against most players throwing out these bets, it's usually a sizing tell. But with this guy, he throws me off because he could have a super weak hand that I don't want to raise and allow him to fold, or he could have a monster that's beating me and I'm way behind of. So for that reason, I stick in the call again, and the river comes out the ace of spades, giving us a full house. He keeps the betting lead and throws out a $75 bet. Now I'm praying that he flopped the straight with king 10. If he has ace-queen, so be it, but we're going to find out. I raise my full house to $295, and after he goes into a mini tank, he eventually folds king-queen offsuit face up for just middle pair and a gut shot. I honestly don't mind the way I played this one, because if I raised at any point, he would have just folded, and I would have lost value from him betting.
Maybe.
That's how long you've been playing?
Yeah.
The same player from the previous hands limps in early position, and I raise the bullets, pocket aces, to $15. 4 people put in the call, so with $75 in the middle, the flop comes out king 6 deuce with 2 spades, and everyone checks to me. Since I'm unblocking the flush draws and there shouldn't be any 2 pairs represented, I throw out a value bet of $35 and just the small blind and the early position player put in the call. With 180 in the middle, the turn comes out the 2 of diamonds, and now the unorthodox player leads out for $45. Against 99.9% of players here, I would raise in this spot, but against this particular player, I just decide to call. The other guy gets out of the way, so with $270 in the pot, the river comes out the 9 of spades, bringing in the front door flush. Our arch nemesis leads out again, but for $50 this time, and even though the flush got there, I just don't see why I could fold after under-repping my hand. I stick in the $50, and our opponent says that a flush is good and turns over ace-deuce offsuit for turn trips. I'm contemplating life right now after getting our aces cracked. In our last interesting hand of the day, we're down around $300 after the shit show from last hand, and we see an early position player raise to $10. The guy who we've been going back and forth with min clicks it to $20, and I look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings, and raise them up to $50. Both the early position player and our rival of the day put in the call, so we're going 3 ways to a flop with $150 in position, and the dealer throws out a 7-6 deuce 2-heart board, giving ourselves the overpair. The early position player checks, and our buddy does his signature move and leads out for $75. He only has about $130 remaining after this bet, so there's not a world where I'm folding the turn on any card, so I just flat, looking to keep in the other player, but he mucks right away. Now we're going heads up to a turn with $300 in the middle, and it comes out the 9 of spades, and our opponent jams his remaining stack for $127. I obviously snap call and show our opponent what he's up against, and he turns over pocket queens, which was the last thing I was expecting. The river comes out a complete blank, and no complaints here after taking down a solid pot.
Chips.
2 o'clock hit, and a couple players in the game even knew it was my time to head out, so we racked up and cashed out. In for $1,000 and out for $1,036 for a whopping $36 profit. Let's try to keep the winning streak going into day 3. I just want to take a second to thank you all for subscribing, and I had a year-end goal of reaching 2,500 subscribers that I'm on pace to crush thanks to all of you. For anyone new here, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my goal by the end of this video. Thanks for all the support, and let's get back to poker. Day 3 isn't off to the best start because I'm stuck $200 in just an hour. It was just your typical slow start of raising ace-queen and getting a shitty run out of 5-6-7 and being forced to fold. So right away, I add on $200 to my original stack, and I'm into the game for $700 total. The first interesting hand starts off with 1 limp in early position, and I look down at the bullets, pocket aces, and raise them up to $20. Next stack calls, and now the cutoff, who is a super tight player, raises to $75. I've never seen him 3-bet without queens, kings, or aces in this spot, so I'm in a dream scenario. To make things even better, the first limper now cold calls the $75, and the action is back on me. I started this hand with $500, so I don't need to go too big and allow my opponent to fold pocket queens, so I just make it $220. The action gets folded to the cutoff, and he puts in the call. But out of nowhere, the original limper also calls the $220. I don't know what the hell he's limping with $3 and somehow calling a $75 bet and now a $220 bet, but I'm here for it. And just like that, the pot is already sitting at $680, and we only have $280 left in our stack. We're going 3 ways to a flop with the best hand in poker, and we see a 9-9-5 2-diamond board, which is one of the best flops we could have asked for. The limper checks, and I could obviously just jam my $280, but I decide to just throw out a $95 bet to hopefully entice the original limper to come along with a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 8s. But he doesn't get the chance to do that when the cutoff just jams his remaining stack of $285. The limper folds, and I obviously snap call knowing we have the best hand. I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and our opponent shows exactly what we thought he had in pocket kings. We are in an unreal position to win over a $1,200 pot when the turn comes out the beautiful 10 of spades, but the river comes out the king of diamonds.
Wow. I don't think that phone's going to work anymore.
I'm just at a complete loss of words after getting 2 outed on the river, which is never fun, especially in a $1,200 pot. After getting stacked and completely wrecked, we buy $600 worth of chips, and we're now into the game for $1,300 total. It's super easy to get tilted after a nasty bad beat, but I have 2 hours left to play, so I need to brush it off and dial it in. In this hand, there's 1 limp, and I raise king-queen offsuit to $16. The big blind puts in the call, and so does the limper when it gets folded back to him. We're going 3 ways to a nice-looking flop of king 7-4 rainbow, giving us a solid top pair. They check it over to me, and I throw out a $16 bet since I should almost always have the best hand. Only the big blind puts in the call, and he tends to lean toward the calling station side of things, so I'm loving this spot. The dealer collects the chips and throws out the 7 of spades turn, and our opponent checks to us again. I don't think there's any point in slowing down now and not going for value, so I throw out a $45 bet looking to target worse kings and a straight draw like 6-5. He doesn't hesitate before calling once again, so with $160 in the middle, the river comes out the beautiful Queen of Hearts, giving us top 2 pair. I'm obviously loving this card because it did give us the top 2 pair, but if our opponent had a king, his kicker problems have improved. So when he checks for a third time, I throw out a value bet of $85 and our opponent snap calls. I turn over my top 2 pair, and he turns over ace-7 of diamonds for trips.
What?
I don't know what the hell is going on this session, but one thing I do know is that I'm down $900 in just 2.5 hours. I'm down to $400 in my stack and see an early position player limp, and when I look down at ace-king of clubs, I think it's good enough for a $20 raise. Small blind and limp are put in the call, so with $60 in the middle, the flop comes out ace-king-jack rainbow, giving us top 2 pair. The early position limper now leads out for $40, and now I have a decision. I could obviously raise now, but I don't want a weak ace to fold, and I also want the small blind to come along. So for those 2 reasons, I just flat, but the small blind gets out of the way. The turn brings out the 8 of hearts, and our opponent continues the aggression for $50. I now think it's time to start pumping money in the pot, so I raise the price of poker to $140. He doesn't take too long before sticking in the call, and with $420 in the middle, we see a nice-looking 2 of clubs river, and our opponent checks to us again. I go all in for our remaining $210, and he snap calls. I turn over our hand, and it's good against ace-jack offsuit for a worse 2 pair. I'm glad I was able to double up and hopefully get something going in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you. Not too much happened for the next hour until this hand went down. Everyone and their mothers put in the $3 limp, and I looked down at the bullets, pocket aces, in the big blind. I'm working on my sizings in this spot, not trying to go too small, but not too big to where I get no action. So I decide on a sizing of $35, and it's enough for 3 people to put in the call. With $140 in the middle, we go to a monotone flop of 8-7 deuce, all diamonds. When they check it over to me, I'm not really loving this board, but I still think a value bet is in order, so I throw out $60. The under the gun and early position players stick in the call, so we're going 3 ways to a turn, which comes out the 5 of hearts. I think this card is way better for our opponents, so I start off with a check, and under the gun jams all in for $7. The early position player just calls the $7, and when it gets folded back to me, I still think I have the best hand since the early position player just called, so I raise the price of poker to $125. I'm trying to get value from hands that have the ace or king of diamonds. The early position player sticks in the call, and with $570 in the pot, the river comes out the king of clubs. He has about $200 remaining in his stack, but I just don't think I could get called by worse in this spot. I check it over to him to see what he does, but he snap checks it back. I turn over our aces, and he shows 9-8 of hearts for top pair and a gut shot on the turn. The other player mucks his hand, and we take down a solid pot on a dangerous board.
Thank you.
No diamond.
I announced to the table that this is my last hand because Father Duty called. What better way to end the session than on a bomb pot? I'm only down $120 at this point, and I'm determined to make the biggest comeback ever and have 3 wins in 3 days on the vlog. 7 people decide to join the bomb pot party, so there's exactly $100 in the middle, and I look down at 8 deuce offsuit. Not the best starting hand in the world, but anything can happen in a bomb pot. We go straight to a flop, and the dealer throws out a jack 6-5 all spades board, and unfortunately, I don't have a spade in my hand. I don't think there's anything to do other than check, and after I check, so does everyone else one by one. The turn brings out the jack of hearts, pairing the board, and now an early position player leads out for $20, and it gets folded to me. Since the flop got checked around, and this player is now only betting 20 into 100, I have a comeback that I need to achieve, so with 8 high in a dream, I raise it up to $63. It gets folded back to him, and he quickly calls. I wasn't really expecting a fold for this sizing, but it was mainly to take the betting lead and set up a massive river bet. At this point, I'm putting him on a small pair or a high spade card in his hand. So with $226 in the middle, we see the miraculous 8 of hearts on the river, and our opponent checks to us. Now I'm perfectly fine with getting to showdown with this trash, and I check it back. Our opponent turns over ace-9 offsuit for just ace-high with the ace of spades, and our 8-deuce offsuit wins a bomb pot to complete the $900 comeback.
Oh my God! Deep to right field, way up there and way out of here! Remarkable come from behind victory.
That hand ended our session, and we were into the game for $1,300 and out for $1,325 for another whopping profit of $25. I'll take it every time. As for our weekly results, we only played 9 hours and 50 minutes of poker, but profited a solid $1,001 for over a $100 hourly rate. Don't mind that at all. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or business inquiries for me, contact me at norcalpoker3@gmail.com.